Welcome to CQ Blind Hams, your source for everything amateur related, tutorials, radio reviews, and so much more. Come on in and stay a while.
Welcome everybody to CQ Blind Hams Roundtable. My name is Joel, W0CAS, and we have Russ, our co-host.
Thanks a lot. This is Russ, KN4MLR from Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah, and today on the show we have John Farina and Sam Birnbaum that has worked with the QLOG program and the QLOG beta testers. Good morning, John.
Morning, Russ. I'm John, W2QCY from Albany, New York.
Good morning, Joel. My name is Sam, W2JDB. I'm in the Oceanside, New York.
All right, guys, welcome. Well, we'll start off a little bit. John, what is some of your, I know you told me earlier that you've been a ham for 50 years. Wow. How did you get started in the hobby? And maybe give us a little insight into your career as a ham.
Sure. I'm from Albany, New York. I grew up in a small town north of here and moved here after getting married. But my ham radio career started, like many people, not everybody, but many people back in our day, started in high school and started after a few years of citizen band radio, and that was pretty cool. But then I usually say that a friend of mine got a general coverage receiver, and I started listening to hams. And he got the receiver and I got the ham license. And then, I don't know, 20 years or so later, he got his ham license. So, but I was licensed as a novice my senior year of high school, passed the general between high school and college. And we were talking earlier, I've been fortunate to be active in some level continuously. I know that doesn't always happen for folks for various reasons, but I've enjoyed doing sidebands, CW, active with our local Aries and Racies groups, been active with several amateur radio clubs that I continue that activity with, and been NCS on HF and VHF nets, did some stints in the Mars programs until the digital stuff became too difficult, too inaccessible. And now, now do a combination of FT8 and CW and a little bit of sideband, and of course the local VHF and HF stuff. And that's kind of my over the year stuff. I've taught a little bit in classes, usually CW and usually rules and regulations. I'm not an electronics person. My careers have been social work and assistive tech instruction for folks who are blind or visually impaired. So I don't know how to open up the stuff and fix it, but I usually know when it's broken.
Yeah, and I seem to be the one doing most of the breaking lately. Okay, Sam, that's a fascinating, John. Sam, a little bit about your radio career and maybe some of your work history. Or I did listen to Eric Guth's interview with you on the QSO show, and that was very fascinating. And for the ones that didn't get chance to listen to that, you want to give us a little history of your radio career?
Well, the radio career, actually, I'll try to keep it a little short. I was a big shortwave listener early on, and when I was 16 years old, I built 3 shortwave radios, and then everything stopped. I did pick up the CB band, the CB radio in my early 20s, late mid-20s, when I was married. But that was the end of it. The reason was because I was never able to copy code. It just didn't come to me. I tried. I bought a key. I bought the records. the whole bit, and as hard as I could never get CW. So I dropped the whole thing. 2014, I found out that the FCC did away with the code requirement. I found a local club. I went there, met the guys. 3 months later, I took the 3 tests in a single day. I went from technician to a general and extra in 55 minutes. And then I bought a radio. About a month later, I bought a radio, put up an antenna, and I started going on the air. FT8 came out, I think, 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And since I was a software developer, I wrote my own logging program for different reasons. And when FT8 came out, I updated my program to connect to WSJTX. And somewhere around 2000, end of 2018, Rich K1HTV sent out an email. Can someone do something for visually impaired hams with FT8? I volunteered, and here we are today with QLOG.
There you go. Oh, we appreciate all your hard work too. Russ, do you have any questions for John or Sam?
I just, not really. Honestly, I was just going to let them kind of run with it. I had all the questions I had about QLOG, I pretty well solved in the last few days, and that's not to say it is a great program. So, Sam, congratulations on your efforts. But no, I'll just let you guys run with it and see where we go from there.
Okay, I have just one, just for the new people that's never did FT8, which is part of the WSJTX software package created by, or instrumental by Joe Taylor. Sam, would you like to tell a little bit about FT8 and what it does and what you can do with it?
Well, FT8 is a digital mode. It's an incredible piece of software that a whole group of people put together over there. It's Joe, Bill, quite a few people on the development team, but it's a phenomenal piece of software that allows you to make contacts under conditions that normally you would not be able to. I'll put it as simply as possible. It is a short, very, very fast messaging system. There's 15-second cycles between transmit and receive. You do have to synchronize yourself to the internet time or clock because it depends on timing in order to decode the message. But whatever they did is just an incredible, incredible piece of software that they put together. FT8, not only FT8, but the new other mode, FT4, which actually speeds up the transmissions to 7.5-second cycle time. I can't say more, and I can't give enough credit for what they've done under these propagation conditions, because a lot of people wouldn't even be turning on their radios under these kind of conditions where they wouldn't be able to make contacts. It's just incredible how this thing took the ham radio community by a storm. It was just unbelievable, the take up of it. And obviously once the FT8 first came out, people asked for more and it just grew. So now they have various contests that are now being able to be used, this program used. And it's just incredible. I don't know how to best describe it. There's just any words that I can describe the phenomenal job that Joe Taylor and his team put together to come up with this product.
Yeah, Joe is a genius in himself. He's a Nobel laureate physicist, and it's amazing at his ability. There's other pieces of software in that package, JT65, JT9, Whisper. It's just a great piece of software in total. And did he design that for moon bounce as his primary reason for designing that program? Is that correct, or do you know?
As far as I know, they designed it, and the reason why it's called WS and JT is obviously Joe Taylor, but there are other gentlemen which I don't want to take away from. Is Bill Somerville from England, another great guy. Was helped me when I had questions, and he helps a lot of people when they have questions. They designed this thing for weak signal propagation. That was the real impetus behind it. They wanted to be able to read signals on the weak signals, and that's the reason for the WS. It's not low power; it's weak signals. You can generate, can use 1,500 watts, and some station somewhere that's a weak signal. You can use 10 watts, and some station that's an S9 signal. So it's not the power, but the actual signal strength and how far below the noise level can they decode those signals. And I think that was the original impetus. It just grew from there. It's like once you do something, they can say, well, can we use this thing for something else? And you will see clones or other things being developed from it, like JS8 Call, which is another one. When I first saw this thing, the thing that I saw that an immediate possibility is for emergency communications under conditions that you normally couldn't communicate.
Exactly. The JS8 call is a good mode to do that with, because you actually can type out messages and send it to.
Exactly. Even if you're not necessarily communicating with one particular person, you can send out messages, even if it's on 15-second cycles, or having a dual system where one transmitter or one rig is transmitting on even and one rig is transmitting on odd, and effectively you can have throws that continuous output of data going out and putting out messages in free text form to get stuff out for either needed material or emergency communications or just health and welfare. It's a phenomenal piece of software that cannot just be used for quote unquote ham communication to get QSOs and fill the log, but for other purposes. It can repurpose it for other things, which is incredible.
It is. And John, how long have you been using the QLOG and FT8?
Well, there we go. Like several people I know, I started out trying to get FT8 going with either JAWS or NVDA screen readers, and just before Sam and Rich, I was contacted or found out about the possibility of being a beta tester. I had worked WSJTX a little bit, but you could only at that point call CQ, and you didn't know who you worked until you looked at the log file, because there was no feedback. You sort of knew with NVDA a little bit. JAWS gave you nothing or almost nothing. So I jumped at the chance to look at something that might make it easier for folks, because I will say that getting WSJTX up and running for someone who's visually impaired, it took a buddy of mine two trips here to get it going, or maybe one trip here and one phone call where we each checked the boxes that we had going. He was a sighted guy, and we tried to parallel what he had checked, and we got it going, and it was interesting. But once QLOG was unveiled and we got a chance to drive it and help each other and Sam figure out what could be done, I've worked places that as a 50-year ham, I'm not sure I remember working at DX stations that I have worked, now. It's pretty cool. So to be in on it and to see what's been done over the 2 years. So probably as Sam said, 2017, I was probably doing it not long before the beta test group was formed, and I would say that for anybody who's interested, we'll give you some group contact information at some point here, or maybe it'll be in the show notes, but or both. But you really, I can't say more that you probably want the assistance of somebody who is sighted to make sure that WSJTX is working before you introduce QLOG, just because then you only have, if you have an issue, you know that the issue is something to do with settings for QLOG that maybe maybe you missed, maybe you checked the wrong box, maybe there's, I know Russ we were talking earlier, he had a problem with his radio not doing something, and that was, he eliminated the trouble by knowing that one part was working. So it's a troubleshooting process sometimes, and if you can, one part of it is already working, it's a lot simpler. And obviously, as beta testers and users, we can help people get going, but we can remote into your computer if you have a screen reader that allows that, but we can't remote into your radio. So if you've got an issue with your radio, we can't help that.
Sam, maybe you could write that program where you can remote. No, that I don't think that'll. But that's very important. I mean, Russ and I had talked about that, making sure WSJTX was working before you even attempted the QLOG. And guys, sometimes WSJTX is not for the faint of heart, because there's Windows issues that comes up, and I've run into that many, many times. A Windows update will change your sound card settings, and then that can be, you wouldn't realize it. Why can't I make a contact? Well, the radio is actually not getting what it needs from the sound card, or the sound card's not getting what it needs from the radio, and it's just it's an ongoing struggle to make sure those things are all with the way they should be. Sam, back to you for a second. You have done a phenomenal job of connecting WSJTX to QLOG, but that wasn't the way you started. You just started it off as just a login program for yourself, and you were contacted by, I guess you said Rich, or was it John? One of the two contacted you, was asking about making it accessible. What kind of challenges do you run into trying to make QLOG accessible?
Well, QLOG, the QLOG was already working with WSJTX. It was already working for me without a problem whatsoever. I had no problems at all. I'd also put in a lot of text-to-speech functionality within QLOG, just as a point of, as a software developer, I was experimenting with it. I was experimenting with a lot of different things. And so because I already had text-to-speech functionality that allowed me to track my radio and if I wanted not to look at the radio, if I wanted not to look at anything, I can turn on a switch and it'll tell me what frequency I was on the radio. It'll tell me what band I was on the radio. It'll tell me what power is on the radio. If you change anything, the computer will tell me what changed. As an experiment, I did that, and I found out that I don't want to listen to it anymore. So you can shut it off. So I had that functionality already in there. So now the only thing I had to do is actually figure out exactly how I can turn that and let the user know what WSJTX is actually sending to me. So I already had parsed out all the UDP messages in WSJTX. As a matter of fact, I gave my code to Rick Ellison, who was working for N1MM, so he can port it in for N1MM. I gave him my source code for parsing the UDP messages. So the first thing that I did was I had to actually put into my code, for at least the first thing that we did was to allow them to reply to third-party CQs so they can reply to messages without them having to worry about clicking on a line and doing it. The program already had filters built in, so all I had to do was select various different filters and say, okay, if it passes those filters, reply to the first station that passes that filter. Not a robot, because every time you did a QSO after it finished, you actually had to reset it. So it was not a robot, and in conversations or emails with the development team in WSJTX, they agreed that this actually fits their definition of not a robot, which was fine.
Because you have to interact with the QSO at one time to get it started.
Right. So the first thing that we did was actually say, okay, let's do the reply, because for me, that was the easiest thing to do. So as it replied, it actually told them who the call station is, what was the call sign phonetically, what country it was in, what was the signal to noise ratio, what grid it was in. And then it kept track of the sequence of transmissions as things went back and forth. And when it finished, it actually logged the QSO to the local log. And if they had club log, EQSL, or QRZ, it'll actually log it to those three in real time. Now,
Go ahead.
What I had to do is, because the normal process in WSJTX is that you have to click the OK button on a log screen. That was the only way that initially that was the log, the actual log record came into QLOG. I actually had to bypass that. I had to actually track and say, okay, this is the time I can actually log it. That was the big trick that I had to play around. And the other part that I had to do was to make sure that even if I logged it, if I had a request to resend something, I was able to reset it and send it back, send another transmission automatically, because in a normal mode, the enable TX was disabled. So there was a whole bunch of stuff, a lot of heuristics that I had to play games with, and put that into the code itself.
Well, what is remarkable to me, as you said, the filters make the choice. There is no way that a blind person can click on a line fast enough or pick out DX calls or whatever you're looking for by just using WSJTX. And that was the thing. As soon as I got QLOG set up and saw what it was doing as far as selecting the calls that were coming across on the call activity screen, I was sold right there. This is it, because there's no way I could duplicate this. I could get WSJTX to answer calls, and I could see who was or what station was, what the call progress was, but it was so cumbersome. And when I started running QLOG, I never looked back. I thought, oh, this is just, however whatever magic is being played with the program, this guy has done it. And so my hat's off to you there, Sam. That's what sold me on it.
Appreciate that. Thank you for the compliment.
There's so much information that's on that line when a guy calls CQ, the time and the time difference between you and his station, and then the signal report. By the time Jaws would read all of that information, the 15-second cycle's usually over with. So like Russ said, there would be no way to make, to do what QLOG does using Jaws or NVDA. And John found that out, I think, pretty quick, didn't you, John?
Yeah, it was, I will say that one of the things we have to remind people is that although QLOG is a self-voicing program, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can turn your screen reader of choice off, because as has been said here, there are occasional glitches in WSJTX, and obviously occasionally in QLOG, because we all know, Sam especially, no software is perfect. So sometimes you need to know what your screen reader is telling you, so that you know if something's happened that you need to pay attention to. We have figured out at least two ways of making that less verbose. JAWS has a feature called speech on demand, which you can enable, and it will only speak to you. It's like the old thing: speak to me only when I ask. And when you ask, interrogate the keyboard with a JAWS command, it will speak to you, but it won't speak when focus changes and things like that. So you're not getting lots of unnecessary information in your ear. The other thing that points out is for QLOG and all this stuff to work effectively, you definitely need another sound card in your system. Now, for those folks who have radios with built-in sound cards, they've already got that, because QLOG and WSJTX, well, WSJTX, let's say, that goes through the radio sound card, much like on a TS590, not yet 590, any radio that has a built-in sound card. For my TS480, I have an external sound card for the WSJTX in terms of a signal link, and then I have a little Sound Blaster Play USB device that I put on, and that gives me the QLOG voice. So I got things in one speaker voicing one thing, and then if I need something from JAWS comes out the normal Windows sound card. And so that takes a little bit of fiddling, understanding why you want that and need that to happen. Once you get it going, it's fine. But yeah, there's definitely lots of stuff there, and that the call screen, now it's available so that you can look at the last 10 entries that WSJTX encoded within QLOG. You can pick one of those, check it, as it were, with the space bar, and then press a keystroke, which happens to be F8, and QLOG will tell WSJTX to, I think that Sam can correct me if I got that sequence wrong, but to respond to a CQ by that station. So you can, again, it's kind of a different, filter, in that you can, so if you see a call sign you want, something you want to work, you can do it that way. And you can actually you can select more than one, and you just keep hitting F8 when the contact is complete, and you can complete those 2 or 3 calls, assuming that the person has not left the band in that time frame.
Yeah, and you mentioned the signal link and your Sound Blaster. Windows will let you take a particular program, whether it be WSJTX or QLOG or anything, and assign the sound card settings for that particular program. And like I have my NVDA is assigned to my internal sound card, and my WSJTX is actually assigned to my USB 2 audio codec, which is my internal sound card of my TS590SG. Or, it could be the USB audio codec for a signal link. And that's good that Windows will let you separate things. Like John said, he's got sounds coming 3 different ways. And that you need that sometimes to be able to do all that you need to do.
Well, it's kind of interesting, because some of the sighted individuals who are helping folks get accustomed to this have a real hard time with all the stuff that we hear and sort of ignore, because we know what we're supposed to hear and what we're not supposed to hear. And I suppose it's much like riding around in a police patrol car and hearing all the other calls on the frequency, and suddenly hearing your unit number and being able to parse that out and say, oh, I really have to pay attention to that.
Yes, it's like I said, it's not for the faint of heart, but it is wonderful. And as a new ham, I've only been a ham for a little less than 5 years, and WSJ, I never had a good sunspot cycle. So you guys, all of you guys have
you're
been
in for a treat.
That's what I'm looking forward to. I listened to Dr. Tamitha Scove this week, and she said, we got 2 sunspots on the sun coming around. And I said, oh, man, I'd love to have a good sunspot cycle where I can actually work some contacts on sideband and not have to depend on FT8, because that's the only way I can make DX right now, being the low part of the sunspot cycle. So I think it will be interesting, Russ, and I think Sam has said this before, to see whether when the sunspot cycle increases, whether WSJTX unfortunately decreases in popularity because people can go back to other modes. The other thing that I think has caused WSJTX to be popular is that for people in restricted antenna situations, you can often make contacts on a weak signal with attic antennas or flagpole antennas or whatever you can put up, and relatively low power. So it will be interesting to see as the cycle increases whether we see what we think, which is more people returning to sideband and even CW. I don't think it's going to drop off. Go ahead, Russ.
Well, I was going to John's point there. Yeah, I've got a little shorty 40 that I had used before, somewhat unsuccessfully. I brought it up onto the second floor. I was in the attic, but I've got it now on the first floor. I'm sorry. And I'd like to experiment with that just to see, how well that works as an indoor antenna. But to your point, last week, I think Joel and I set up a contact, and we were not on 14.074. We were up a little bit. And I swear I could not hear anything. I went over back to my screen, and sure enough, it had decoded the contact. So, that just impressed me to no end. But
I tell people it's the only mode I use in ham radio that I turn the volume down on my radio. Because I don't want to hear the howl.
I sound like an old fax machine.
That's a good description.
Yeah. But back to you were talking about your setup. I think we're very similar. I use a signal link, and for the WSJTX portion of it, but I do use the internal sound card for JAWS, and I use the silence JAWS feature, which works just fine. And I tell you, the default voice for QLOG, which is one of the Microsoft voices, Sam has put in the ability to tweak that voice with the pitch and the speed. I've got it tweaked now so that it's it's as good as Eloquence. So you really once you're in QLOG, as you said, you may have to jump back and forth between your screen reader, but it's kind of rare. It really sounds good, and that's a very nice touch to the program.
I just want to ask, we usually ask a little bit about your station and what kind of equipment you have. John, if you give us a little description of what equipment you're using, what radio antenna, other things you may be using, and then pass it over to Sam and let him do the same if you guys don't mind.
Sure. Currently, I have a TS480. That's for those who aren't familiar with it, it's a Kenwood. It's an HF and 6 meter transceiver. This one has a history of being modified for some Mars activity that I used to do. So very technically, it goes where no man should go. and I try not to put it there. I have a loop antenna, horizontal looper on my back fence, and a tower and a dipole. The loop is fed with ladder line into a balun. The dipole, of course, is coax. I do have a 10, 15 meter and 20 meter beam. I think that's got a little issue, and I've been hesitant to get guys to come and look at it because I know it's going to be a fairly large project even to go take a look, unless it's something very obvious that they can see. But since I use the loop and the dipole more these days, it seems like that's not an issue. And I have a Kenwood THD 71 for VHF, UHF, and of course the ever-present THD 74 for D-Star. And no, I don't have a DMR radio yet. Even though
don't really need one now because we have the
Shame on you.
bridge. We have the bridge. You can just jump on the bridge.
Almost don't need one. But that's the station. When I do CW, I usually do it with either a Cootie key from Steve W1SFR or a Big Alley paddle. And I was just thinking that years ago, the computer I have is a relatively inexpensive Lenovo Staples Special for about $300. And I was thinking, we used to say, why would you ever want a piece of computer equipment in your shack? And now it seems like you can't get away without them. So Sam, it's all yours.
Okay, I'll try to keep it short. My current system is basically outside of the amplifier is a TS590S. I have an MFJ 1025 noise canceling signal enhancer. I have an SDR Play 2, and my amplifier is a ACOM 1200S, and then my antenna is a vertical 43-foot vertical, and the tuner is an automatic tuner from ACOM 04A. That is the extent of the HF and 6-meter equipment. For local communications, I'm using an 8900R, Yaesu FT8 8900R. Portable operations is basically an FT8 17. And homebrewed vertical, and actually, no, it's not homebrewed. The vertical is a 17-foot MFJ vertical collapsing whip and a homebrewed coil that I built myself. That's about it. That's basically all the equipment that I have. The sound card is basically the PC sound card and the TS590S. It's connected with a USB cable to serial port to USB cable, and that's it. Very, very simple. I consider it simple. Other people may consider it not so simple, but then everything is relative.
That's right. I use the 590 SG, and I always wondered what the difference between the SG and the S are, and I couldn't tell you. Have you run across the differences between the two radios?
The SG obviously is a later model of the S. I have no idea if they improved anything inside the actual receiver or transmitter. They did give you a lot more options on it. There are a few more options on it. Some of the menus have changed, but it's basically the same unit with some improvements. You have a CW reader built into the radio. That's one thing that I don't have. You can see both VFOs at the same time, I believe, on the SG. You also have something on the DRV out. You can actually take that and make that RF out to an SDR radio, to an SDR like the RSP Play. I don't do that. I actually have an MFJ 1718, which actually allows me to use the SDR RSP Play as a pan adapter.
Oh yeah. I was wondering about that receive antenna port. Because I always thought maybe when I transmitted, I might blow up one of those little SDR plays or something. But I guess it's designed to do that, to send out to an external SDR. I'm thinking about trying to do that. Now, here's the question of the day. Do you Use Your Amplifier on FT8. I know it's been a misnomer that it's a low power mode, but it's not. Like you said earlier, it's a low signal mode. But a lot of people I'm finding are running amplifiers. And do you use your amp much?
Yes, I do. I use it all the time. And the reason why I do that is I run my radio at about 5 to 10 watts most. And then the amplifier does the rest. At 5 watts, I'm usually putting out about 200 watts with the amplifier. It's a very, very high gain amplifier, close to 15 dB gain. And
yes.
So the radio is now not being stressed. People don't realize it. That the digital mode on any radio will stress it out. Because you're running it almost 50% utility. So you are stressing it. So the less stress you can put on the radio, the longer life on the radio. And the amplifier, which is rated at 1,000 watts, running at 200 watts, is loafing along.
Yes. That's also a bulletproof amplifier, isn't it?
It's pretty much bulletproof. I got this amplifier. I originally had the 600S, and I upgraded to the 1200 only because I wanted a little bit more headroom. And by headroom, I mean that if I have to run 500 watts on phone or digital, whatever, to get out, at 500 watts, that means I'm at about 80% capacity or 80% utilization of a 600 watt amplifier. At 500 watts, I'm less than about 50% on the 1200. So that gives me a little bit more headroom to run on it. It stresses the amplifier less. It's not so much that I want to run 1500 watts. It's just the fact that I have a little more headroom to run if I do have to run a little bit high power. And you'd be surprised that sometimes when I have to run it up to about 400 watts, I get signals of -12 or -20. So that just goes to show you that it's not so much the power that you're running, it's how well the propagation is working out at the other side or the receiving station that's coming back to me.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to make a QSO with China and Singapore and a few other countries a couple of days ago, and I was decoding them at 0 or -2 or -1. I thought, these guys have got to be pushing 1,000, 1,500 watts, and it may not be. It may just been the propagation, but I was sending 65, 75 watts. I even bumped it up to 100 just for 2 cycles just to see if I could get the QSO, and no. Those guys wasn't coming back to me. So, I've always thought about getting an amp and maybe running 200 to 300 watts and see if that would help.
Yeah, one of the things you realize is that a lot of the DX stations, you can tell, or at least you can guess, when you know that you've got a pretty good signal, but they're not coming. They're not coming back to you. They're not coming back to you. They've got a good signal to you. You got to figure that maybe either A, it's a pileup, or B, they have a very high noise floor. And I think that's one of the things you realize. And I'm kind of the other way. I don't have an amplifier, so I keep the radio at somewhere around 40 or 45 watts. And if I can't make it there for FT8, I just say, well, we'll call it a day, and that's the way it is.
One comment I'd like to make that people should realize: when you're getting a signal, when you are receiving a signal of what they're telling you, what they're receiving you at, versus what you're receiving there at, you could be receiving it at -2, and they can be receiving, or you could, as you say, you could be receiving it at 0, or you could be receiving it at +10. If you have a noise level of 0, anything that's coming to you is going to be a plus number. That signal to noise ratio is based upon your noise that you're getting, not necessarily the power that they're sending. And that's what people don't understand. And one of my programs that I gave to the group that allows them to read the all.txt file. It's called an all-text. Actually, the program is called all-text. And it allows him to access the all.txt file no matter how big it is. I actually wrote a component in there that allows them to analyze the signal to noise ratio of the same stations. So if you have more than 15 decodes of the same stations in the same day, it will actually tell you what the variance of that signal report is.
Wow.
And you can take a look at it and you can see that within one standard deviation, quite a few of them move around, where you start out at one level and all of a sudden it's one standard deviation or two standard deviations away.
Wow.
Yeah, you can really see that if sometimes if you've got a long cycle where somebody the QSO is not being finished, and your station keeps sending out a different SNR report, propagation has changed or something has changed. Yeah,
I've noticed that, and the antenna makes a lot of. They may be running a beam and beaming out high, the signal to me, but like you said, they may have a lot of noise. They may be downtown Beijing or somewhere, and those towns are probably covered in noise, sort of like New York may be.
That's true. I don't know how much time we have left, but do we want to talk about how new users can get
yes, that was the next
with QLOG and all that?
Yes, I was asked a good question. Do you have the program hosted somewhere where I can put a link on CQ Blind or blindhams.com, or do you want to? How would you like it to be made available for anybody to get a hold of the software?
Well, at this point, it's the files are hosted on the QLOG users group at groups.io. So potential interested people can send a message to QLOG users, QLOG USERS, plus, as in plus sign, subscribe at groups.io, and you will get back the usual message to go ahead and reply. And once somebody does that, I get a notice as the group owner that we have a new subscriber. We do ask that people put their call sign in because not everybody has their call sign in an email address. Right. So we ask that they put that in so that we're trying to make sure that it goes to legitimate hams. And I believe Rich K1HTV diligently checks to make sure that the call sign that people put in is a legitimate one. So that's good. Once you've been approved for posting to the group, you can go to groups.io, and just as you would for getting those people who are on the blind hams list, there are files on that portion of the groups.io site. You can go to the files area of the QLOG users group and find not only the QLOG.exe file, which is the executable file, but definitely the setup files, the documentation files, I should say, for QLOG. And generally there are two of them. There's a setup file a help file for sighted users, and then there's the QLOG users manual, and they're usually named by the current version, and we try to take the older version files out of the list and move them somewhere. We're not always as good at that, so make sure that you have the current version. That's it. What would be helpful, however, Joel, is the two files that I sent you, which are a demo of the process of responding to a decoded contact, a decoded CQ using QLOG, and a calling CQ with QLOG, which is one of the other features big features that it took Sam, I'm sure, a lot of sweat and tears to incorporate. I know it took a while. Those two, if you could host them on, or put a link to them on the Blind Hams website, that would be great. I can modify those files if you want to give a little more information on QLOG. We tried to keep the time the file length and time down because I wasn't sure where they were going to go.
Well, I could do a separate podcast like I did. If you've been listening, to it, you know about the Open GD77 project, and I put Ian's demos up as a separate podcast than the roundtable.
Sure, we can.
And if you would like to do a little tag or intro, we could do that.
Those files would be, they would be fine. The only caveat is if I obviously took out the silence between some of the silence between the cycles because just to make the files shorter, so you're not seeing an accurate representation of the time cycle of a QSO.
Right,
but that's
15
really
seconds
irrelevant.
back and forth.
Yeah, it's really irrelevant.
That'd be great. If you work on that and make a little bit more explanation to how it's working and things like that.
I might be
definitely
calling you for some audio insert help because I'm not an audio editor.
Angelo is our editor, and Russ, they're editors.
He's in trouble because I might be calling him.
Joel, may I make one comment over here? I did put a full video with audio.
Yes, YouTube.
How exactly it works.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
That was great. Yeah.
I don't know if you have that. I don't know if you have that link, but I will send you that link to the YouTube. You can listen to it. My voice is not on it. You will only hear the computer voice on it.
Yes, that's great. Yeah, we'll put a link to that in the show notes and on the blindhams.com. That'd be great. Yep, that's awesome. Yeah, I remember when you did that. I thought that's pretty cool. Well, guys, Russ, do you have anything else? Any questions?
No, I think we covered everything very well.
I sure appreciate you guys joining us today, and I've been wanting to do this for quite a while, ever since I started the roundtable, and because this is a very interesting subject to many blind and visually impaired hams that love HF, and this would be another way to fill up the logbook, and that's what I use it for. I love FT8 because I'm not a rag chewer on HF, but I do like to get chase DX, and this is awesome. So I appreciate it. And John and Sam, if you ever have an update or you would like to come back, just let us know, and we look forward to it. So thanks everybody for listening to CQ Blind Hams Roundtable.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much for having me, and it's a pleasure talking to you guys.
Great. We enjoyed it.